Welcome to another discussion of the Holy Bible, King James Version. Today we'll be covering Genesis chapter 42, and we'll be talking about it, and y'all are welcome to listen and sit back and enjoy it. It's a movie in your mind, and it is a true story. It is the exact wording that comes from the Holy Bible. Starting at chapter 42, and we will end it at the end, Genesis 50, and we will start on another day for the chapters of Exodus. Thank you for listening here.
Chapter 42. When Jacob heard that there was grain available in Egypt, he said to his sons,
"Why are you standing around looking at one another? I've heard there's grain in Egypt. Go down and buy some for us before we all starve to death."
So Joseph's 10 older brothers went down to Egypt to buy grain. Jacob wouldn't let Joseph's younger brother Benjamin go with them, however, for fear some harm might come to him. So Jacob's sons arrived in Egypt along with others to buy food, for the famine had reached Canaan as well. Since Joseph was governor of all Egypt and in charge of the sale of the grain, it was to him that his brothers came. They bowed low before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph recognized them instantly, but he pretended to be a stranger.
"Where are you from?"
he demanded roughly.
"From the land of Canaan,"
they replied.
"We've come to buy grain."
Joseph's brothers didn't recognize him, but Joseph recognized them, and he remembered the dreams he had had many years before. He said to them,
"You are spies. You have come to see how vulnerable our land has become."
"No, my lord,"
they exclaimed.
"We've come to buy food. We are all brothers and honest men, sir. We are not spies."
"Yes, you are,"
he insisted.
"You have come to discover how vulnerable the famine has made us."
"Sir,"
they said,
"there are 12 of us brothers, and our father is in the land of Canaan. Our youngest brother is there with our father, and one of our brothers is no longer with us."
But Joseph insisted.
"As I said, you are spies. This is how I will test your story. I swear by the life of Pharaoh that you will not leave Egypt unless your youngest brother comes here. One of you go and get your brother. I'll keep the rest of you here bound in prison. Then we'll find out whether or not your story is true. If it turns out that you don't have a younger brother, then I'll know you are spies."
So we put them all in prison for 3 days. On the 3rd day Joseph said to them,
"I am a God-fearing man. If you do as I say, you will live. We'll see how honorable you really are. Only one of you will remain in the prison. The rest of you may go on home with grain for your families. But bring your youngest brother back to me. In this way, I will know whether or not you are telling me the truth. If you are, I will spare you."
To this they agreed. Speaking among themselves, they said,
"This has all happened because of what we did to Joseph long ago. We saw his terror and anguish and heard his pleadings, but we wouldn't listen. That's why this trouble has come upon us."
"Didn't I tell you not to do it?"
Reuben asked.
"But you wouldn't listen, and now we are going to die because we murdered him."
Of course, they didn't know that Joseph understood them as he was standing there, for he had been speaking to them through an interpreter. Now he left the room and found a place where he could weep. Returning, he talked some more with them. He then chose Simeon from among them and had him tied up right before their eyes. Joseph then ordered his servants to fill the men's sacks with grain, but he also gave secret instructions to return each brother's payment at the top of his sack. He also gave them provisions for their journey. So they loaded up their donkeys with the grain and started for home. But when they stopped for the night, and one of them opened his sack to get some grain to feed the donkeys, he found his money in the sack.
"Look,"
he exclaimed to his brothers.
"my money is here in my sack."
They were filled with terror and said to each other,
"What has God done to us?"
So they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan and told him all that had happened.
"The man who is ruler over the land spoke very roughly to us,"
they told him.
"He took us for spies. But we said, 'We're honest men, not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of one father. One brother has disappeared, and the youngest is with our father in the land of Canaan.' Then the man, the ruler of the land, told us, This is the way I will find out if you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me, and take grain for your families, and go on home. But bring your youngest brother back to me. Then I will know that you are honest men and not spies. If you prove to be what you say, then I will give you back your brother, and you may come as often as you like to buy grain."
As they emptied out the sacks, there at the top of each one was the bag of money paid for the grain. Terror gripped them as it did their father. Jacob exclaimed,
"You have deprived me of my children. Joseph has disappeared. Simeon is gone. And now you want to take Benjamin too. Everything is going against me."
Then Reuben said to his father,
You may kill my 2 sons if I don't bring Benjamin back to you. I'll be responsible for him.
But Jacob replied,
"My son will not go down with you, for his brother Joseph is dead, and he alone is left of his mother's children. If anything should happen to him, you would bring my gray head down to the grave in deep sorrow."
Chapter 43. But there was no relief from the terrible famine throughout the land. When the grain they had brought from Egypt was almost gone, Jacob said to his sons,
"Go again and buy us a little food."
But Judah said,
The man wasn't joking when he warned that we couldn't see him again unless Benjamin came along. If you let him come with us, we will go down and buy some food. But if you don't let Benjamin go, we may as well stay at home. Remember that the man said, "You won't be allowed to come and see me unless your brother is with you." "Why did you ever tell him you had another brother?"
Jacob moaned.
"Why did you have to treat me with such cruelty?" "But the man specifically asked us about our family,"
they replied.
"He wanted to know whether our father was still living, and he asked us if we had another brother, so we told him. How could we have known he would say, 'Bring me your brother'?"
Judah said to his father,
"Send the boy with me, and we will be on our way. Otherwise we will all die of starvation, and not only we, but you and our little ones. I personally guarantee his safety. If I don't bring him back to you, then let me bear the blame forever. For we could have gone and returned twice by this time if you'd let him come without delay."
So their father Jacob finally said to them,
"If it can't be avoided, then at least do this. Fill your bags with the best products of the land. Take them to the man as gifts: balm, honey, spices, myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. Take double the money that you found in your sacks, as it was probably someone's mistake. Then take your brother and go back to the man. May God Almighty give you mercy as you go before the man, that he might release Simeon and return Benjamin. And if I must bear the anguish of their deaths, then so be it."
So they took Benjamin and the gifts and double the money and hurried to Egypt, where they presented themselves to Joseph. When Joseph saw that Benjamin was with them, he said to the manager of his household,
These men will eat with me this noon. Take them inside and prepare a big feast.
So the man did as he was told and took them to Joseph's palace. They were badly frightened when they saw where they were being taken.
"It's because of the money returned to us in our sacks,"
they said.
"He plans to pretend that we stole it. Then he will seize us as slaves and take our donkeys."
As the brothers arrived at the entrance to the palace, they went over to the man in charge of Joseph's household. They said to him,
Sir, after our first trip to Egypt to buy food, as we were returning home, we stopped for the night and opened our sacks. The money we had used to pay for the grain was there in our sacks. Here it is. We have brought it back again. We also have additional money to buy more grain. We have no idea how the money got into our sacks." "Relax. Don't worry about it,"
the household manager told them.
"Your God, the God of your ancestors, must have put it there. We collected your money all right."
Then he released Simeon and brought him out to them. The brothers were then led into the palace and given water to wash their feet and food for their donkeys. They were told they would be eating there, so they prepared their gifts for Joseph's arrival at noon. When Joseph came, they gave him their gifts and bowed low before him. He asked them how they had been getting along, and then he said,
"How is your father, the old man you spoke about? Is he still alive?"
"Yes,
They replied,
He's alive and well.
Then they bowed again before him. Looking at his brother Benjamin, Joseph asked,
Is this your youngest brother, the one you told me about? May God be gracious to you, my son.
Then Joseph made a hasty exit because he was overcome with emotion for his brother and wanted to cry. Going into his private room, he wept there. Then he washed his face and came out, keeping himself under control.
Bring on the food,
he ordered. Joseph ate by himself, and his brothers were served at a separate table. The Egyptians sat at their own table because Egyptians despise Hebrews and refuse to eat with them. Joseph told each of his brothers where to sit, and to their amazement he seated them in the order of their ages, from oldest to youngest. Their food was served to them from Joseph's own table. He gave the largest serving to Benjamin, 5 times as much as to any of the others. So they all feasted and drank freely with him. Chapter 44. When his brothers were ready to leave, Joseph gave these instructions to the man in charge of his household.
Fill each of their sacks with as much grain as they can carry, and put each man's money back into his sack. Then put my personal silver cup at the top of the youngest brother's sack, along with his grain money.
So the household manager did as he was told. The brothers were up at dawn and set out on their journey with their loaded donkeys. But when they were barely out of the city, Joseph said to his household manager,
Chase after them and stop them. Ask them, Why have you repaid an act of kindness with such evil? What do you mean by stealing my master's personal silver drinking cup, which he uses to predict the future? What a wicked thing you have done!
So the man caught up with them and spoke to them in the way he had been instructed.
What are you talking about?
The brothers responded,
What kind of people do you think we are, that you accuse us of such a terrible thing? Didn't we bring back the money we found in our sacks? Why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If you find his cup with any one of us, let that one die, and all the rest of us will be your master's slaves forever.
Fair enough,
the man replied.
except that only the one who stole it will be a slave. The rest of you may go free.
They quickly took their sacks from the backs of their donkeys and opened them. Joseph's servant began searching the oldest brother's sack, going on down the line to the youngest. The cup was found in Benjamin's sack. At this they tore their clothing in despair, loaded the donkeys again, and returned to the city. Joseph was still at home when Judah and his brothers arrived, and they fell to the ground before him.
What were you trying to do?
Joseph demanded.
Didn't you know that a man such as I would know who stole it?
And Judah said,
Oh, my lord, what can we say to you? How can we plead? How can we prove our innocence? God is punishing us for our sins. My lord, we have all returned to be your slaves. We and our brother, who had your cup in his sack.
No,
Joseph said.
Only the man who stole the cup will be my slave. The rest of you may go home to your father.
Then Judah stepped forward and said,
My lord, let me say just this one word to you. Be patient with me for a moment, for I know you could have killed me in an instant, as though you were Pharaoh himself. You asked us, my lord, if we had a father or a brother. We said, yes, we have a father, an old man, and a child of his old age, his youngest son. His brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother's children, and his father loves him very much. And you said to us, bring him here so I can see him. But we said to you, my lord, the boy cannot leave his father, for his father would die. But you told us, you may not see me again unless your youngest brother is with you. So we returned to our father and told him what you had said, and when he said, go back again and buy us a little food, we replied, we can't, unless you let our youngest brother go with us. We won't be allowed to see the man in charge of the grain unless our youngest brother is with us. Then my father said to us, you know that my wife had 2 sons, and that one of them went away and never returned, doubtless torn to pieces by some wild animal. I have never seen him since. If you take away his brother from me too, and any harm comes to him, you would bring my gray head down to the grave in deep sorrow. And now, my lord, I cannot go back to my father without the boy. Our father's life is bound up in the boy's life. When he sees that the boy is not with us, Our father will die. We will be responsible for bringing his gray head down to the grave in sorrow. My lord, I made a pledge to my father that I would take care of the boy. I told him, if I don't bring him back to you, I will bear the blame forever. Please, my lord, let me stay here as a slave instead of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. For how can I return to my father if the boy is not with me? I cannot bear to see what this would do to him.
Chapter 45. Joseph could stand it no longer.
Out, all of you!
He cried out to his attendants. He wanted to be alone with his brothers when he told them who he was. Then he broke down and wept aloud. His sobs could be heard throughout the palace, and the news was quickly carried to Pharaoh's palace.
I am Joseph,
He said to his brothers.
Is my father still alive?
But his brothers were speechless. They were stunned to realize that Joseph was standing there in front of them.
Come over here,
He said. So they came closer, and he said again,
I am Joseph, your brother whom you sold into Egypt. But don't be angry with yourselves that you did this to me, for God did it. He sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. These 2 years of famine will grow to 7, during which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God has sent me here to keep you and your families alive, so that you will become a great nation. Yes, it was God who sent me here, not you. And he has made me a counselor to Pharaoh, manager of his entire household, and ruler over all Egypt. Hurry, return to my father and tell him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me master over all the land of Egypt. Come down to me right away. You will live in the land of Goshen, so you can be near me with all your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds, and all that you have. I will take care of you there, for there are still 5 years of famine ahead of us. Otherwise, you and your household will come to utter poverty.
Then Joseph said,
You can see for yourselves, and so can my brother Benjamin, that I really am Joseph. Tell my father how I am honored here in Egypt. Tell him about everything you have seen, and bring him to me quickly.
Weeping with joy, he embraced Benjamin, and Benjamin also began to weep. Then Joseph kissed each of his brothers and wept over them, and then they began talking freely with him. The news soon reached Pharaoh.
Joseph's brothers have come.
Pharaoh was very happy to hear this, and so were his officials. Pharaoh said to Joseph,
Tell your brothers to load their pack animals and return quickly to their homes in Canaan. Tell them to bring your father and all of their families and to come here to Egypt to live. Tell them Pharaoh will assign to you the very best territory in the land of Egypt. You will live off the fat of the land. And tell your brothers to take wagons from Egypt to carry their wives and little ones and to bring your father here. Don't worry about your belongings, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours.
So the sons of Jacob did as they were told. Joseph gave them wagons, as Pharaoh had commanded, and he supplied them with provisions for the journey. And he gave each of them new clothes, but to Benjamin he gave 5 changes of clothes and 300 pieces of silver. He sent his father 10 donkeys loaded with the good things of Egypt, and 10 donkeys loaded with grain and all kinds of other food to be eaten on his journey. So he sent his brothers off, and as they left, he called after them,
Don't quarrel along the way.
And they left Egypt and returned to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan.
Joseph is still alive,
They told him.
and he's ruler over all the land of Egypt.
Jacob was stunned at the news. He couldn't believe it. But when they had given him Joseph's messages, and when he saw the wagons loaded with the food sent by Joseph, his spirit revived. Then Jacob said,
It must be true. My son Joseph is alive. I will go and see him before I die.
Chapter 46. So Jacob set out for Egypt with all his possessions, and when he came to Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. During the night, God spoke to him in a vision. Jacob, Jacob, he called.
Here I am.
Jacob replied. I am God, the voice said, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will see to it that you become a great nation there. I will go with you down to Egypt, and I will bring your descendants back again, but you will die in Egypt with Joseph at your side." So Jacob left Beersheba, and his sons brought him to Egypt. They carried their little ones and wives in the wagons Pharaoh had provided for them. They brought their livestock, too, and all the belongings they had acquired in the land of Canaan. Jacob and his entire family arrived in Egypt, sons and daughters, grandsons and granddaughters, all his descendants. These are the names of the Israelites, the descendants of Jacob who went with him to Egypt. Reuben was Jacob's oldest son. The sons of Reuben were Hanoch, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. The sons of Simeon were Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Shaul. Shaul's mother was a Canaanite woman. The sons of Levi were Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. The sons of Judah were Onan, Shelah, Perez, and Zerah. But and Onan had died in the land of Canaan. The sons of Perez were Hezron and Hamul. The sons of Issachar were Tola, Puah, Jashub, and Shimron. The sons of Zebulun were Sered, Elon, and Jalil. These are the sons of Jacob who were born to Leah in Padan Aram, along with their sister Dinah. In all, Jacob's descendants through Leah numbered 33. The sons of Gad were Zephon, Haggai, Shunai, Esbon, Eri, Arodai, and Arelai. The sons of Asher were Imnah, Ishva, Ishvai, and Beriah. Their sister was named Serah. Beriah's sons were Heber and Malkiel. These 16 were descendants of Jacob through Zilpah, the servant given to Leah by her father Laban. The sons of Jacob's wife Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin. Joseph's sons, born in the land of Egypt, were Manasseh and Ephraim. Their mother was Asenath, daughter of Potipherah, priest of Heliopolis. Benjamin's sons were Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gera, Naaman, Ichai, Rosh, Mupim, Hupim, and Ard. These 14 were the descendants of Jacob and his wife Rachel. The son of Dan was Hushim. The sons of Naphtali were Jazil, Gunai, Jezer, and Shilem. These 7 were the descendants of Jacob through Bilhah, the servant given to Rachel by her father Laban. So the total number of Jacob's direct descendants who went with him to Egypt, not counting his sons' wives, was 66. Joseph also had 2 sons who had been born in Egypt. So altogether, there were 70 members of Jacob's family in the land of Egypt. Jacob sent Judah on ahead to meet Joseph and get directions to the land of Goshen. And when they all arrived there, Joseph prepared his chariot and traveled to Goshen to meet his father. As soon as Joseph arrived, he embraced his father and wept on his shoulder for a long time. Then Jacob said to Joseph,
"Now let me die, for I have seen you with my own eyes, and know you are still alive."
And Joseph said to his brothers and to all their households,
"I'll go and tell Pharaoh that you have all come from the land of Canaan to join me. And I will tell him, 'These men are shepherds and livestock breeders. They have brought with them their flocks and herds and everything they own. So when Pharaoh calls for you and asks you about your occupation, tell him, "We have been livestock breeders from our youth, as our ancestors have been for many generations." When you tell him this, he will let you live here in the land of Goshen, for shepherds are despised in the land of Egypt."
Chapter 47. So Joseph went to see Pharaoh and said,
"My father and my brothers are here from Canaan. They came with all their flocks and herds and possessions, and they are now in the land of Goshen."
Joseph took 5 of his brothers with him and presented them to Pharaoh. Pharaoh asked them,
"What is your occupation?"
And they replied,
"We are shepherds like our ancestors. We have come to live here in Egypt, for there is no pasture for our flocks in Canaan. The famine is very severe there. We request permission to live in the land of Goshen."
And Pharaoh said to Joseph,
"Now that your family has joined you here, choose any place you like for them to live. Give them the best land of Egypt. The land of Goshen will be fine. And if any of them have special skills, put them in charge of my livestock too."
Then Joseph brought his father Jacob and presented him to Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh.
"How old are you?"
Pharaoh asked him. Jacob replied,
"I have lived for 130 hard years, but I am still not nearly as old as many of my ancestors."
Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh again before he left. So Joseph assigned the best land of Egypt, the land of Ramses, to his father and brothers, just as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph furnished food to his father and brothers in amounts appropriate to the number of their dependents. Meanwhile the famine became worse, and the crops continued to fail throughout Egypt and Canaan. Joseph collected all the money in Egypt and Canaan in exchange for grain, and he brought the money to Pharaoh's treasure house. When the people of Egypt and Canaan ran out of money, they came to Joseph, crying again for food.
"Our money's gone,"
They said.
"but give us bread. Why should we die?"
Well then,
Joseph replied.
since your money is gone, give me your livestock. I will give you food in exchange.
So they gave their livestock to Joseph in exchange for food. Soon all the horses, flocks, herds, and donkeys of Egypt were in Pharaoh's possession. But at least they were able to purchase food for that year. The next year they came again and said,
"Our money is gone, and our livestock are yours. We have nothing left but our bodies and land. Why should we die before your very eyes? Buy us and our land in exchange for food. We will then become servants to Pharaoh. Just give us grain so that our lives may be saved, and so the land will not become empty and desolate."
So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. All the Egyptians sold him their fields, because the famine was so severe, and their land then belonged to Pharaoh. Thus all the people of Egypt became servants to Pharaoh. The only land he didn't buy was that belonging to the priests, for they were assigned food from Pharaoh and didn't need to sell their land. Then Joseph said to the people,
See, I have bought you and your land for Pharaoh. I will provide you with seed so you can plant the fields. Then when you harvest it, 1/5 of your crop will belong to Pharaoh. Keep 4/5 for yourselves, and use it to plant the next year's crop and to feed yourselves, your households, and your little ones.
"You have saved our lives.
they exclaimed.
May it please you, sir, to let us be Pharaoh's servants."
Joseph then made it a law throughout the land of Egypt, and it is still the law, that Pharaoh should receive 1/5 of all the crops grown on his land. But since Pharaoh had not taken over the priests' land, they were exempt from this payment. So the people of Israel settled in the land of Goshen in Egypt, and before long they began to prosper there, and their population grew rapidly. Jacob lived for 17 years after his arrival in Egypt, so he was 147 years old when he died. As the time of his death drew near, he called for his son Joseph and said to him,
"If you are pleased with me, swear most solemnly that you will honor this, my last request. Do not bury me in Egypt. When I am dead, take me out of Egypt and bury me beside my ancestors."
So Joseph promised that he would.
"Swear that you will do it."
Jacob insisted. So Joseph gave his oath, and Jacob bowed in worship as he leaned on his staff. Chapter 48. One day, not long after this, word came to Joseph that his father was failing rapidly. So Joseph went to visit him, and he took with him his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. When Jacob heard that Joseph had arrived, he gathered his strength and sat up in bed to greet him. Jacob said to Joseph,
"God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me. He said to me, 'I will make you a multitude of nations, and I will give this land of Canaan to you and your descendants as an everlasting possession.' Now I am adopting as my own sons these 2 boys of yours, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born here in the land of Egypt before I arrived. They will inherit from me, just as Reuben and Simeon will. But the children born to you in the future will be your own. The land they inherit will be within the territories of Ephraim and Manasseh. As I was returning from Padan, Rachel died in the land of Canaan. We were still on the way, just a short distance from Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. So, with great sorrow, I buried her there beside the road to Ephrath."
Then Jacob looked over at the 2 boys.
"Are these your sons?"
He asked.
Yes,
Joseph told him.
these are the sons God has given me here in Egypt.
And Jacob said,
Bring them over to me, and I will bless them.
Now Jacob was half blind because of his age and could hardly see. So Joseph brought the boys close to him, and Jacob kissed and embraced them. Then Jacob said to Joseph,
I never thought I would see you again, but now God has let me see your children too.
Joseph took the boys from their grandfather's knees, and he bowed low to him. Then he positioned the boys so Ephraim was at Jacob's left hand, and Manasseh was at his right hand. But Jacob crossed his arms as he reached out to lay his hands on the boys' heads. So his right hand was on the head of Ephraim, the younger boy, and his left hand was on the head of Manasseh, the older. Then he blessed Joseph and said,
May God, the God before whom my grandfather Abraham and my father Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life, and the angel who has kept me from all harm, may he bless these boys. May they preserve my name and the names of my grandfather Abraham and my father Isaac, and may they become a mighty nation.
But Joseph was upset when he saw that his father had laid his right hand on Ephraim's head. So he lifted it to place it on Manasseh's head instead.
No, father,
he said.
This one over here is older. Put your right hand on his head.
But his father refused.
I know what I'm doing, my son,
he said.
Manasseh, too, will become a great people, but his younger brother will become even greater. His descendants will become a multitude of nations.
So Jacob blessed the boys that day with this blessing.
The people of Israel will use your names to bless each other. They will say, May God make you as prosperous as Ephraim and Manasseh.
In this way Jacob put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh. Then Jacob said to Joseph,
I'm about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to Canaan, the land of your ancestors. And I give you an extra portion beyond what I have given your brothers, the portion that I took from the Amorites with my sword and bow.
Chapter 49. Then Jacob called together all his sons and said,
Gather around me, and I will tell you what is going to happen to you in the days to come. Come and listen, O sons of Jacob. Listen to Israel your father. Reuben, you are my oldest son, the child of my vigorous youth. You are first on the list in rank and honor. But you are as unruly as the waves of the sea, and you will be first no longer. For you slept with one of my wives. You dishonored me in my own bed. Simeon and Levi are two of a kind, men of violence. Oh, my soul, stay away from them. May I never be a party to their wicked plans. For in their anger they murdered men, and they crippled oxen just for sport. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce. Cursed be their wrath, for it is cruel. Therefore I will scatter their descendants throughout the nation of Israel. Judah, your brothers will praise you. You will defeat your enemies. All your relatives will bow before you. Judah is a young lion that has finished eating its prey. Like a lion he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness, who will dare to rouse him? The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from his descendants, until the coming of the one to whom it belongs, the one whom all nations will obey. He ties his foal to a grapevine, the colt of his donkey to a choice vine. He washes his clothes in wine, because his harvest is so plentiful. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth are whiter than milk. Zebulun will settle on the shores of the sea and will be a harbor for ships. His borders will extend to Sidon. Issachar is a strong beast of burden, resting among the sheepfolds. When he sees how good the countryside is, how pleasant the land, he will bend his shoulders to the task and submit to forced labor. Dan will govern his people like any other tribe in Israel. He will be a snake beside the road, a poisonous viper along the path that bites the horse's heels so the rider is thrown off. I trust in you for salvation, O Lord. Gad will be plundered by marauding bands, but he will turn and plunder them. Asher will produce rich foods, food fit for kings. Naphtali is a deer let loose, producing magnificent fawns. Joseph is a fruitful tree beside a fountain. His branches reach over the wall. He has been attacked by archers who shot at him and harassed him, but his bow remained strong, and his arms were strengthened by the mighty one of Jacob, the shepherd, the rock of Israel. May the God of your ancestors help you. May the Almighty bless you with the blessings of the heavens above, blessings of the earth beneath, and blessings of the breasts and womb. May the blessings of your ancestors be greater than the blessings of the eternal mountains, reaching to the utmost bounds of the everlasting hills. These blessings will fall on the head of Joseph, who is a prince among his brothers. Benjamin is a wolf that prowls. He devours his enemies in the morning, and in the evening he divides the plunder.
These are the 12 tribes of Israel, and these are the blessings with which Jacob blessed his 12 sons. Each received a blessing that was appropriate to him. Then Jacob told them,
Soon I will die. Bury me with my father and grandfather in the cave in Ephron's field. This is the cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre in Canaan, which Abraham bought from Ephron the Hittite for a permanent burial place. There Abraham and his wife Sarah are buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah are buried. And there I buried Leah. It is the cave that my grandfather Abraham bought from the Hittites.
Then when Jacob had finished this charge to his sons, he lay back in the bed, breathed his last, and died. Chapter 50. Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph told his morticians to embalm the body. The embalming process took 40 days, and there was a period of national mourning for 70 days. When the period of mourning was over, Joseph approached Pharaoh's advisers and asked them to speak to Pharaoh on his behalf. He told them,
Tell Pharaoh that my father made me swear an oath. He said to me, I am about to die. Take my body back to the land of Canaan, and bury me in our family's burial cave. Now I need to go and bury my father. After his burial is complete, I will return without delay.
Pharaoh agreed to Joseph's request.
Go and bury your father, as you promised.
So Joseph went with a great number of Pharaoh's counselors and advisers, all the senior officers of Egypt. Joseph also took his brothers and the entire household of Jacob, but they left their little children and flocks and herds in the land of Goshen. So a great number of chariots, cavalry, and people accompanied Joseph. When they arrived at the threshing floor of Atad near the Jordan River, they held a very great and solemn funeral with a 7-day period of mourning for Joseph's father. The local residents, the Canaanites, renamed the place Abel Mizraim, for they said,
This is a place of very deep mourning for these Egyptians.
So Jacob's sons did as he had commanded them. They carried his body to the land of Canaan and buried it there in the cave of Machpelah. This is the cave that Abraham had bought for a permanent burial place in the field of Ephron the Hittite near Mamre. Then Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had accompanied him to his father's funeral. But now that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers became afraid.
Now Joseph will pay us back for all the evil we did to him,
they said. So they sent this message to Joseph.
Before your father died, he instructed us to say to you, Forgive your brothers for the great evil they did to you. So we, the servants of the God of your father, beg you to forgive us.
When Joseph received the message, he broke down and wept. Then his brothers came and bowed low before him.
We are your slaves,
they said. But Joseph told them,
Don't be afraid of me. Am I God to judge and punish you? As far as I am concerned, God turned into good what you meant for evil. He brought me to the high position I have today so I could save the lives of many people. No, don't be afraid. Indeed, I myself will take care of you and your families.
And he spoke very kindly to them, reassuring them. So Joseph and his brothers and their families continued to live in Egypt. Joseph was 110 years old when he died. He lived to see 3 generations of descendants of his son Ephraim and the children of Manasseh's son Machir, who were treated as if they were his own.
Soon I will die,
Joseph told his brothers.
but God will surely come for you, to lead you out of this land of Egypt. He will bring you back to the land he vowed to give to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath, and he said,
When God comes to lead us back to Canaan, you must take my body back with you.
So Joseph died at the age of 110. They embalmed him, and his body was placed in a coffin in Egypt.